I congratulate my honourable friend on securing it at such a crucial time for the industry. Ms Baz, pubs and hospitality are a force for good. They are good for the economy, contributing more than £120 billion nationally and delivering £54 billion in tax receipts to the Treasury that I'm sure the Chancellor will be grateful for next week. They are good for jobs, employing 3.5 million people, spread across every age band, from teenagers to pensioners, and with an even gender balance. They are good for our communities, with our pubs, cafes and restaurants at the heart of local life, bringing people together. For many villagers, the pub or cafe is the last service surviving in the village, offering a community hub that covers everything from jobs clubs and parents and toddler groups through to serving as the village shop, and even, as I saw in one Pub is the Hub initiative in Cornwall, the hairdressers. They are a force for good socially, helping to tackle the scourge of loneliness and isolation. Few people could have failed to have been moved by the advert film for Charlie's Bar last Christmas, showing an elderly man walking from his house to his wife's grave, raising his cap to passers-by only to be blanked, but finding comfort and companionship in his local Infomana. Less well celebrated are the hundreds of initiatives up and down the country, such as the Go-To Place at Love and Liquor in Codsall in my constituency, which brings 60 or more people together each Wednesday morning for a coffee, a chat, bit of breakfast. And while we're all too familiar with the dangers of excess drinking, well-regulated and well-run pubs and bars are forces for good for our mental health. The work done by Professor Dunbar at Oxford University shows that people who have a local where they drink regularly in moderation are likely to be happier and more content than people who don't. Their physical and mental health is likely to be better than people who don't. And they are likely to have more friends on whom they can depend, and they are likely to feel more engaged in their community than people who don't. Pubs and hospitality venues have, of course, faced a range of pressures over the past few decades, some of which have been referred to this morning. Some are the result of changing consumer demands and preferences, some changes in social habits. But others have certainly been exacerbated by policy decisions made here in Westminster and Whitehall, such as the smoking ban, high business rate bills, and alcohol duty rates that are significantly higher than most Western European countries. The previous government took a range of actions to help alleviate some of these pressures. They abandoned Labour's hated duty escalator, which had meant above-inflation rises in duty every single year. They cut beer duty for the first time in half a century, followed by multiple freezes in duty that meant that beer duty on a pint in a pub is now significantly lower in real terms than it had been in 2010. They introduced a reduced rate of duty for draft beer and cider, taking advantage of the freedoms after Brexit, helping to reduce the huge disparity that pubs and bars face compared to supermarkets and off-licences. The link between duty rates and alcohol consumption is tenuous, but we know that higher taxes on alcohol does lead people to switching their drinking from well-regulated licensed premises to drinking at home, where they also tend to switch from drinking lower-strength beers and ciders to higher ABV wines and spirits. And crucially, hospitality and retail business rate relief has meant that small and independent hospitality venues receive 75% off their business rates, making the difference for many between being able to continue and being forced to shut their doors for good. The new government made a lot of promises before the election, some of which they now seem to be trying to row back from. But pubs and hospitality need them to deliver, and to deliver now, starting with next week's budget. The Chancellor needs to start with a cut to alcohol duties. A return to the previous government's approach of continuous duty rises would be devastating for many pubs and breweries. That can be done by widening the draft beer duty differential cutting the cost of draft beers and ciders in pubs, bars and restaurants, targeting support where it is so desperately needed. Above all, the Chancellor needs to finally publish her replacement for business rates with a new system that is fair to the hospitality sector, which pays a disproportionate share of business rate receipts. Of course.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. He mentions business rates, and picking up on the point made by my Scottish colleague earlier, the fact is that pubs are closing twice as fast in parts of Scotland as they are on this side of the border. Sir Tim Martin, the boss of Wetherspoons, in recent days has strongly criticised the Scottish Government for their deeply unhelpful attitude to rating. Would the honourable member agree with me that the finger should be pointed north of the border as well, and something should be done before more pubs close?
I certainly agree with the honourable gentleman that whilst we have and have long had a number of challenges in England with hospitality sector, the picture north of the border is even worse because of decisions that have been made by the Scottish Government. But it is essential that the Chancellor, after 3 years, publishes the replacement. The Chancellor announced that we should scrap business rates 3 years ago, but 3 years later, the sector is still no clearer as to what she's bringing in instead. They need clarity, and they need it next week. But if for some reason, even after 3 years, the Chancellor still can't say what she's replacing business rates with, then she must commit to extending the 75% relief, not just until next March or the March after, but right up until a new system is in place. Hospitality businesses are particularly impacted by high energy costs, and the government needs to make good on the promises they made before the election to help. The Prime Minister promised to take £53 billion off business energy bills by 2030. And so I asked the Minister a simple question. How much can hospitality businesses expect their energy bills to fall by next year? Pubs and hospitality also need the government to recognise the impact that regulation, no matter how well intentioned, has on small hospitality businesses in particular. It was disappointing that neither the Deputy Prime Minister nor the Business Secretary seemed to acknowledge the warnings in their own impact assessment, warning about the harms that could be caused to small businesses in sectors like hospitality by their employment legislation. But those fears are only made worse by reports that the government is considering further regulation banning smoking in outdoor beer gardens and outside of nightclubs, a change that would have minimal, if any, health benefits, or causing huge damage to venues, and could even have the perverse effect of shifting drinking from outside in outdoor beer gardens to people drinking and smoking more inside in their homes. Finally, as has been said, for the many pubs and hospitality venues that are just about getting by, the reported rise in employers' national insurance contributions could tip many over the edge, making the difference between continuing and closing. If the Chancellor insists on going ahead with this highly damaging jobs tax, then it is even more important that the government does more to support pubs and hospitality. Ms Vaz, I congratulate the honourable gentleman again for bringing this debate, because pubs and hospitality are a force for good. They need and they deserve our support.